Edgar Cayce describes the spirit world. Between dreams and death, every night you die a small death. Your breathing slows, your heartbeat drops, your muscles release, and your consciousness, that brilliant, eternal spark of awareness, slips free from your body and travels to a world most people never remember visiting. Every morning you are reborn, your soul returns, your eyes open, and the journey you just took vanishes like mist in sunlight, leaving only fragments, whispers, the fading edge of a dream you can't quite recall. But in those hours between, in that vast, unmapped territory where your body lies perfectly still and your consciousness roams free, there exists a realm that Edgar Cayce spent 43 years methodically exploring. He called it the borderland, the spirit world that exists between dreams and death. And he brought back descriptions so detailed, so consistent across thousands of readings, so utterly unlike anything found in religious texts or philosophical speculation, that even hardened skeptics found themselves unsettled by the precision of his testimony. Cayce didn't speculate about the afterlife. He visited it. Repeatedly. Systematically, 14,000 times during his life, he entered self-induced trance states that allowed his consciousness to separate from his body and travel to this intermediate realm. And each time he returned, he spoke of what he'd seen with the calm authority of a cartographer mapping a newly discovered continent. What he discovered will fundamentally change how you understand every night of your life. It will reframe sleep from unconscious rest into conscious adventure. It will reveal that the people you've lost are not gone. They're waiting in a dimension you visit regularly but rarely remember. And most importantly, it will remove the fear from your final transition, because you'll realize you've been practicing for death every single night of your existence. The borderland is real. It's not metaphor, not wishful thinking, not religious fantasy. It's a dimensional territory as concrete as the physical world, operating under specific laws, inhabited by specific beings, serving specific purposes, and you already know it intimately, even if your waking mind has forgotten. Tonight, when you close your eyes, you will return there. You always do. But now that you're about to discover what Edgar Cayce saw, you might finally remember where you've been. Edgar Cayce was a photographer by trade, a quiet man from Kentucky with an 8th grade education and a devout Christian faith. Nothing about his background suggested he would become America's most documented psychic, or that his testimony would provide the most comprehensive map of the spirit world ever recorded. But at age 21, Cayce lost his voice completely. For months, doctors could find no physical cause and no cure. In desperation, a local hypnotist offered to try a trance induction, and when Cayce entered that altered state, something extraordinary happened. His voice returned, clear, strong, but it wasn't quite his voice anymore. It was deeper, more formal, and it spoke with authority about medical conditions, treatments, and spiritual truths that the waking Cayce had never studied. This began a practice that would continue for 43 years. Twice daily, sometimes more, Cayce would lie on a couch, loosen his tie and belt, fold his hands over his solar plexus, and enter a death-like trance. His breathing would become almost imperceptible, his body temperature would drop, and his consciousness would leave, traveling to what he consistently described as the same intermediate realm, returning with information that could be verified, tested, and documented. Unlike near-death experiences that last seconds or minutes, Cayce spent hours in this borderland. He wasn't catching glimpses through a veil. He was walking its landscapes, observing its inhabitants, studying its architecture, learning its laws. He documented these journeys with photographic precision across 14,000 readings now preserved in the ARE archives in Virginia Beach. And here's what makes his testimony uniquely authoritative. The consistency. Over 4 decades, through different questions from different people about different topics, his descriptions of the borderland never contradicted. The geography remained stable. The entities he encountered appeared repeatedly with the same characteristics. The laws governing the realm operated predictably. He was, quite literally, a cartographer of consciousness, visiting the same territory again and again, bringing back increasingly detailed maps that allowed others to verify his findings through their own explorations. In one documented case, a woman asked Cayce during a reading to locate her deceased father in the spirit world. Cayce's consciousness traveled to what he called the plane of reunion and described her father standing in a garden filled with luminous flowers that emitted musical tones. He was wearing a blue robe. He was teaching a group of younger souls about the relationship between sound and light, and he wanted his daughter to know he was happy, purposeful, and waiting patiently for their eventual reunion. The woman had never told Cayce her father had been a music teacher in life. She'd never mentioned his love of gardening. She'd never shared that his favorite color was blue. But every detail Cayce provided matched, not just her memories, but specific, verifiable facts about her father's personality and passions. This wasn't guesswork. This wasn't cold reading. This was direct observation of a realm Cayce could access at will, as reliably as you might visit a neighboring city. But what gave him this ability? How did his consciousness separate from his body so completely, so safely, that he could return 14,000 times without harm? The answer lies in something Cayce described in nearly every reading about the borderland, a luminous connection that binds the traveling soul to its physical body, ensuring return is always possible. He called it the silver cord. Imagine a thread of light, impossibly thin, impossibly strong, pulsing with your heartbeat, stretching from the crown of your physical body into infinite distance, connecting you to your traveling consciousness, no matter how far it roams. This is the silver cord, and according to Edgar Cayce, it's the reason you can wake up every morning. Cayce described this cord with remarkable consistency across hundreds of readings. It emerges from the body near the pineal gland, extends through the crown chakra, and maintains an unbreakable connection between your physical form and your traveling awareness. As long as this cord remains intact, you can journey to any dimension, any plane of existence, any depth of the spirit world, and still return safely to your sleeping body. It functions like an energetic tether, a cosmic umbilical cord. When your alarm goes off, when your body needs you, when danger threatens your physical form, the cord pulls you back instantly, effortlessly, automatically. But here's what makes the silver cord so crucial to understanding the borderland. It has a natural limit, a threshold. Cayce observed that during ordinary sleep, most people's consciousness doesn't travel far from the body. You float nearby, processing the day's experiences in what we call dreams. The silver cord remains short, thick, and vibrant. But in deeper states, meditation, trance, profound sleep, consciousness can travel much farther. The cord extends, becomes thinner, more luminous, stretching across dimensional boundaries. And if you travel far enough, you approach what Cayce called the threshold, a boundary that separates the territory of the living from the territory of the dead. This threshold isn't a wall, it's not guarded, it's more like a vibrational frequency shift. On one side, you remain tethered to your physical life, able to return at will. Cross beyond it, and you enter the realm where souls between incarnations reside, the true borderland where the deceased learn and rest and prepare for their next journey. Most people approach this threshold every night, but rarely cross it. Your consciousness travels to the edge, peers across, sometimes catches glimpses of what lies beyond. A familiar face, a luminous city, a feeling of profound peace. Then morning comes and you're pulled back, remembering only fragments if you remember anything at all. But some people, the dreamers, the sensitive, the spiritually awakened, occasionally cross that threshold while the silver cord remains intact. They walk briefly among the dead. They explore the deeper planes of the borderland. They return with memories so vivid, so real, that waking life feels like the dream by comparison. Cayce was one of these rare travelers. His self-induced trances allowed him to consciously cross the threshold while maintaining perfect control over his return. And what he discovered beyond that boundary challenges everything we think we know about death, consciousness, and the structure of reality itself. In one reading preserved in the ARE archives, Cayce described a man who had died suddenly in an accident. His consciousness remained near his body for days, confused, unable to understand why his family couldn't see or hear him. His silver cord had been severed at the moment of death, but his awareness hadn't yet crossed the threshold into the deeper borderland. He was trapped in what Cayce called the earth plane reflection, the shallowest layer of the spirit world, where confusion and attachment keep souls earthbound. Only when a guide finally appeared and showed him the threshold, explaining that crossing it would not separate him from his loved ones, but simply move him to a different dimension where he could rest and learn, did he surrender and move forward. This earth plane reflection is just the outermost layer of the borderland. Beyond it lie 6 more planes, each vibrating at a higher frequency, each serving a different purpose in the soul's eternal education. And Cayce mapped them all. The spirit world between dreams and death is not a single location. It's not one heaven or one waiting room or one ambiguous afterlife. It's 7 nested dimensions, each vibrating at a different frequency of consciousness, each serving as a classroom, a healing space, a meeting ground, or a preparation zone for the soul's ongoing journey. Edgar Cayce described these planes with architectural precision, and his descriptions remained consistent across decades of readings. He called them by various names, sometimes poetic, sometimes technical, but the structure never changed. 7 levels, 7 frequencies, 7 stages of the soul's education. The first plane, the one closest to physical Earth, Cayce called the earth plane reflection. This is where newly deceased souls often linger, especially if death came suddenly or if attachment to physical life remains strong. It mirrors the physical world almost exactly. You see buildings, streets, landscapes, but they're slightly translucent, slightly dreamlike. Time feels strange. Solid objects seem to flicker. Souls trapped here don't realize they're in the borderland. They think they're still alive, or they're deeply confused about what's happening. They try to interact with living people who can't see them. They become what we call ghosts. Not malevolent spirits, just confused consciousness that hasn't yet accepted the transition. The second plane is the plane of appearances, where desire and belief shape reality instantly. This is where souls first discover the creative power of consciousness. If you imagine a garden appears. If you believe you should be punished, you experience punishment. If you long for a mansion, you materialize one. But these creations are temporary, sustained only by the focusing of attention. Most souls pass through this plane quickly once they realize its illusory nature, though some linger here for what feels like lifetimes, playing with their newfound creative abilities. The third plane, this is where the borderland becomes truly profound, is the plane of learning. Cayce described vast libraries here, halls of study, classrooms where advanced teachers offer instruction to souls between incarnations. This is one of the primary destinations your consciousness travels to during deep sleep. You attend lessons here nightly, studying subjects relevant to your current life challenges and your soul's evolutionary goals. You wake with no conscious memory, but your subconscious retains everything, and slowly, mysteriously, you find yourself knowing things you were never taught. The fourth plane is the plane of reunion, and this is the realm that offers the most comfort to those grieving. Here, soul families gather. Here you can meet deceased loved ones not through memory or imagination, but through actual dimensional contact. During dreams, during meditation, during the threshold moments between waking and sleeping, your consciousness can briefly access this plane and encounter those who've crossed over permanently. The meetings feel more real than waking life because they are real. You're not creating the experience, you're having it. The fifth plane Cayce called the plane of light beings, inhabited by guides, teachers, healers, and what religious traditions call angels. These are advanced souls, some who've completed the cycle of reincarnation, others who've never incarnated in physical form, who dedicate themselves to assisting those still learning in lower dimensions. When you pray for guidance, when you call out for help in moments of crisis, these beings respond. They cannot interfere with your free will, but they can offer inspiration, protection, and gentle steering toward your highest path. The sixth plane is the plane of pure creation, where consciousness becomes so refined, so unified with divine intelligence that souls can participate in cosmic creation itself. Cayce described souls here designing solar systems, crafting the templates for planets and species, working with pure thought energy to bring new realities into being. This is the realm of the Elohim, the co-creators, the masters who operate at frequencies so high that even describing their work requires stretching language beyond its normal limits. And finally, the seventh plane, the threshold of return, where souls prepare to incarnate again. Here, you review your past lives, plan your next one, choose your challenges, select your soul contracts with other beings who will play crucial roles in your upcoming journey. This plane is less a location and more a transition point, a frequency where the decision to return to physical density crystallizes into intention, and intention begins shaping the circumstances of your next birth. Cayce taught that we don't experience all 7 planes in a single night's sleep. Most nights, most people's consciousness travels only to the 2nd or 3rd plane, processing emotions in the plane of appearances or studying in the plane of learning. But during profound sleep, during meditation, during moments of spiritual openness or crisis, consciousness can reach the higher planes, accessing wisdom and healing that transforms life in ways we can barely comprehend. The structure exists, the dimensions are real, and every night, whether you remember or not, you navigate these planes according to your soul's needs and your consciousness's vibrational frequency. But how do you know if your dreams are just mental processing, or if you've actually traveled to the borderland? Not all dreams are created equal, and Edgar Cayce made distinctions that most dream interpreters miss, distinctions that change everything about how you understand your nightly experiences. There are psychological dreams, the mind's way of processing fears, memories, daily events. These dreams are mental. They occur in the shallow waters of consciousness, using symbols and scenarios to help your psyche integrate experiences and emotions. A dream where you're late for work, or showing up naked to a meeting, or being chased by something vague and threatening. These are psychological dreams, useful, therapeutic, but not dimensional travel. Then there are dimensional dreams, experiences where your consciousness actually leaves your body, crosses the threshold, and journeys to the borderland planes. These dreams have qualities that make them unmistakable once you learn to recognize them. Cayce taught that dimensional dreams are characterized by several consistent markers. First, impossibly vivid colors. not just brighter than waking life, but more real somehow, as though physical reality operates with a limited color palette and the borderland has access to hues that don't exist in the visible spectrum. People who've had dimensional dreams describe colors they can't name, colors that evoke emotions before they register visually. Second, a sense of being more awake than waking. This is the paradox dimensional travelers report consistently. The dream feels hyper-real, more present, more immediate than ordinary consciousness. You notice details with crystalline clarity. Time dilates strangely. You spend what feels like hours in a dimension, only to wake and discover 10 minutes have passed. Third, encounters with the deceased that carry specific information, not vague impressions or wish-fulfillment fantasies, but conversations where deceased loved ones deliver details you couldn't have known, warnings that later prove accurate, confessions that resolve long-standing mysteries. Cayce documented hundreds of these encounters, always emphasizing the same criterion. If the dream provides verifiable information, it's not imagination, it's contact. Fourth, locations that feel geographically real but exist nowhere on Earth. A city of crystalline buildings, a library with books made of light, a garden where music grows from soil instead of flowers. These places have consistent geography. If you return to them in multiple dreams, they're unchanged. The same architecture, the same atmosphere, the same sense of being an actual location rather than a mental creation. And fifth, a profound heaviness upon waking, as though you've returned from a great distance and your consciousness needs time to fully re-anchor in your physical body. You feel disoriented, slightly dissociated, as if waking life is the dream and the place you just left is the reality. This feeling usually fades within minutes, but those who've experienced it never forget the sensation. In one case from the ARE archives, a woman recorded a dream where she walked through a vast hall filled with glowing books. She pulled one volume from a shelf and opened it to see her own life unfolding in living images, not just events, but her internal experiences, her hidden thoughts, the ripple effects of her choices on others. She woke shaking, crying, transformed by what she'd witnessed. When Cayce was asked about this dream during a reading, he confirmed immediately. She had visited the Hall of Records in the plane of learning. She had accessed the Akashic Records, the universe's complete archive of every soul's journey, and what she saw there was true, not metaphor, not symbol, true. This is the power of understanding dimensional dreams. Once you recognize them, you realize sleep is not unconsciousness. It's not rest. It's education. It's travel. It's preparation. Every night, your soul journeys to the borderland. And some nights, the nights when everything aligns just right, you remember where you've been. But among all the locations Cayce visited in the borderland, one stood above the rest in significance, beauty, and mystery. A central hub where souls gather, where knowledge is stored, where the architecture itself defies physical laws. He called it the City of Light. In hundreds of readings spanning 40 years, Edgar Cayce described returning to the same location in the borderland. Not similar places, not archetypal images, the same city, and his descriptions remained hauntingly, impossibly consistent. He called it by various names depending on the context of the reading: the City of Light, the Hall of Records, the Temple of Learning, the Crystal City, but he was always describing the same place, a luminous metropolis that serves as the central hub of the spirit world between dreams and death. The buildings there are not constructed from physical materials. They're made of crystallized thought, pure consciousness given form through collective intention. They shimmer with inner light, and their architecture is impossible. Structures that would collapse in physical reality somehow remain perfectly stable in the borderland, held together by laws that transcend gravity and geometry. Cayce described gardens that grow music instead of flowers, plants that emit harmonic frequencies as they bloom, creating symphonies that you don't just hear but feel moving through your entire being. He spoke of fountains that flow with liquid light, and when you pass through their streams, memories from past lives surface with perfect clarity. The streets of this city are not paved with gold, as religious texts might claim, but with something more remarkable, translucent crystal that reflects the consciousness of whoever walks upon it, showing them their own spiritual state in real time. Walk these streets with fear and they darken. Walk them with love and they radiate brilliance that illuminates everyone nearby. At the center of the city stands what Cayce called the Great Temple, a structure so vast that its ceiling is barely visible, so luminous that it seems to generate its own internal sun. Inside this temple are the Akashic Records, not books on shelves, though that's how they sometimes appear to human consciousness struggling to comprehend their true nature. They're more like living archives, energetic imprints of every thought, every action, every moment of every soul's journey across all lifetimes and all dimensions. Cayce claimed that advanced souls study here between incarnations, reviewing their past lives, understanding the karmic patterns they're working to resolve, planning their next physical journey with meticulous care. But the living can visit too. During deep sleep, during profound meditation, during moments when consciousness expands beyond its normal boundaries, some people find themselves standing in this temple, surrounded by light, accessing information that changes everything they thought they knew about themselves and their purpose. In one documented case, a man came to Cayce desperate for guidance. His business was failing, his marriage was crumbling, he felt lost, purposeless, certain his life had been a waste. During the reading, Cayce's consciousness traveled to the City of Light and accessed this man's records. What he found was startling. The man had chosen this difficult life deliberately. In his previous incarnation, he'd been powerful, wealthy, and cruel, using resources to dominate others, caring nothing for the suffering he caused. His soul, recognizing the imbalance, had designed this current life as remediation. He would experience poverty to learn generosity. He would face rejection to learn empathy. Every challenge was chosen, a curriculum he'd written for himself to correct the karma of his last life. When Cayce relayed this information, the man wept, not from despair, but from recognition. Something in him had always suspected his suffering had meaning, and now he understood what it was. He wasn't being punished, he was being educated, and that reframe changed everything. This is what the City of Light offers: truth without judgment, wisdom without condemnation, clarity that empowers rather than shames. It's where your soul goes when it needs to remember why you're here and what you came to learn. But Cayce issued an important warning about this city. Access is earned through consciousness. You cannot force your way in through ritual or will. You can only raise your frequency high enough that the city becomes visible, and that requires releasing fear, practicing love, and approaching the borderland with humility and sincere intention to learn rather than to acquire power or special knowledge for ego's purposes. The city exists, it's waiting, and those who are ready to see it will find it appearing in their dreams, calling them to remember what their souls already know. But not everyone you meet in the borderland is a teacher or a guide. Some of the most powerful encounters happen when your consciousness crosses paths with someone you've loved and lost, someone who no longer has a physical body, but continues to exist in the dimensions you visit nightly. Here is what Edgar Cayce observed that most spiritual teachers won't tell you. When you dream of someone who has died, you are often not dreaming at all. You are meeting them. The barrier between the living who travel in sleep and the dead who reside permanently in the borderland is thin, almost non-existent. And during your nightly journeys, especially if you travel to the plane of reunion, conscious contact with deceased loved ones is not only possible, but common. Cayce documented hundreds of cases where dreamers received specific, verifiable information from those who had crossed over. A widow dreamed of her husband telling her where he'd hidden a life insurance policy she didn't know existed. She woke, checked the location he'd described, and found the documents. A father dreamed of his deceased daughter, warning him not to take a specific flight. He changed his plans. The plane crashed. These weren't symbolic dreams requiring interpretation. They were actual encounters facilitated by the borderland's unique properties where consciousness can interact regardless of whether it's anchored in a physical body. But Cayce emphasized that these meetings follow specific laws that govern all dimensional contact between the living and the dead. First, the deceased cannot force themselves into your dreams. They can't override your free will or invade your consciousness. You must be vibrationally ready, open, grieving gently rather than desperately, not clinging but willing to receive. When grief becomes attachment, when you refuse to release the deceased to their journey, you actually block contact because your energy creates a wall of need they cannot penetrate. Second, the deceased often appear younger or healthier than they were at death. This confused Cayce initially, until he understood that in the borderland, consciousness shapes appearance. A soul who died elderly and frail can present themselves as they were in their physical prime because that's how they identify themselves. They're showing you their true form, not their final body, but their essential self. Third, there are things the deceased cannot tell you. Cayce never fully understood why certain boundaries exist, but he observed them consistently. The dead cannot reveal future events with precision. They cannot solve all your problems or make your decisions for you. They cannot give you lottery numbers or stock tips. The borderland has rules about what information can cross from their dimension to yours, and these rules are enforced by mechanisms beyond even Cayce's comprehension. What they can offer is comfort, forgiveness, validation, that they continue to exist and that your connection endures. They can warn you of dangers if the warning doesn't violate your free will. They can deliver messages of love that heal generational wounds. They can appear at crucial moments in dreams, in meditation, sometimes even in waking consciousness as a felt presence, to remind you that death is not separation, only transformation. In one particularly moving case from the ARE archives, a mother who had lost her young son to illness spent years consumed by guilt, convinced she'd failed to protect him. Every night she dreamed of him crying, reaching for her, unable to rest. These dreams were torment, not comfort. When Cayce conducted a reading for her, he accessed the plane of reunion and located her son. But what he found was shocking. The child was fine, joyful, learning, growing in the borderland schools, cared for by loving guides. He wasn't crying. He wasn't reaching for his mother. Those dreams weren't coming from him. They were projections of her own guilt and grief. Cayce delivered a message from the son. Tell my mother to release me. Her grief weighs on me like chains. I can feel her sorrow from here, and it makes me sad not for myself, but for her. I am happy, I am whole, and I will see her again. But she must let me continue my journey, and she must continue hers. The mother wept when she heard this, and slowly she began the painful work of releasing him, not forgetting, not loving less, but allowing him to exist in his new dimension without being tethered by her unresolved emotions. This is the delicate balance of borderland contact, staying open to connection while releasing attachment, loving without clinging, remembering without preventing the deceased from moving forward in their own soul's journey. If you want to meet your loved ones in the borderland consciously, Cayce offered simple guidance. Before sleep, speak to them, not in desperation, but in calm invitation. I'm ready to see you. I release you to your path, and I'm open to meeting in the places our souls can reach. Then let go. Don't force, don't demand. Just sleep and trust that if the time is right, the borderland will facilitate the encounter. And when you wake with tears on your face, and joy in your heart, and the unmistakable feeling that you've been somewhere real, you'll know. You'll know. Why do we spend a third of our lives unconscious? Why did evolution design us to lie completely vulnerable for hours every night? Defenseless against predators, unproductive, seemingly wasting time. Edgar Cayce's answer reframes everything. Sleep is not rest. Sleep is school. Every night your consciousness travels to the learning planes of the borderland, attending lessons specifically tailored to your soul's current evolution. Some nights you study healing arts, not anatomy as taught in medical schools, but the energetic templates underlying physical health. Other nights you learn karmic mathematics, understanding the intricate web of cause and effect that shapes your relationships and challenges. Other nights you practice navigating between dimensions, learning to control your consciousness's movement through various planes of existence. You wake with no conscious memory, no diploma, no evidence you've attended anything at all, but your soul remembers everything. And slowly, mysteriously, you find yourself knowing things you were never formally taught, solving problems with wisdom that seems to come from nowhere, feeling drawn toward paths you cannot logically explain. This is the soul's nighttime education manifesting in your waking life. Cayce documented countless cases of people developing abilities or insights that their conscious life experience couldn't account for. A woman with no musical training suddenly began composing complex symphonies after years of particularly vivid dreams. A man with no medical background found himself knowing instinctively which herbs would heal specific ailments. A child began speaking about historical events he'd never studied, describing them with such accuracy that historians verified his accounts. In each case, when Cayce accessed their records, he found the same pattern. Their consciousness had been studying these subjects during sleep for years, sometimes decades. The borderland teachers had been working with them nightly, preparing them for gifts they would eventually need in their waking lives. This is why some children are prodigies, born with abilities that seem impossible for their age. They're not miraculous exceptions. They're souls who studied intensively in the borderland between incarnations and retained that knowledge when they entered their new physical body. But the nighttime education isn't just about acquiring skills, it's about soul growth, character development, learning to love more deeply, forgive more completely, serve more selflessly. These lessons don't look like classrooms with blackboards and teachers at podiums. They look like experiences. You might dream of being betrayed, and in the dream, you practice forgiveness. You might dream of possessing great power, and in the dream, you practice using it wisely rather than selfishly. You might dream of facing your greatest fear, and in the dream, you practice moving toward it with courage, rather than fleeing. These aren't random scenarios. They're curriculum, designed by teachers in the borderland who understand exactly what your soul needs to learn next. And when you wake, the emotional patterns you practiced in the dream begin to manifest in your waking behavior. You become slowly, imperceptibly different, more patient, more compassionate, more aligned with your soul's highest purpose. Cayce taught a powerful practice for those who want to engage consciously with their nighttime education. Before sleep, ask a specific question. Frame it clearly in your mind. Show me what I need to understand about my relationship with my father. Teach me how to heal my chronic pain. Help me understand my life's purpose. Then sleep, and pay attention to what emerges, not just in dreams, but in the days that follow. Insights surfacing during mundane tasks, books falling off shelves and opening to relevant passages, strangers saying exactly what you needed to hear. This is how the borderland responds to sincere questions, not always in dramatic visions, but through the gentle orchestration of your daily life to provide exactly the teaching you're ready to receive. Your soul is a student in an eternal university. Earth is one campus, the borderland is another, and sleep is the commute between them, the nightly journey that ensures your education never stops, even when your conscious mind believes you're doing nothing but resting. But among all the lessons the borderland offers, one stands apart in both frequency and intensity, a teaching so important, so universal, that nearly everyone receives it repeatedly throughout their lives. The lesson of how to die consciously. If you have ever dreamed of your own death, falling from impossible heights, drowning in dark water, being chased into shadow, Edgar Cayce offers a perspective that transforms terror into grace. These are not nightmares, they are rehearsals. Your soul knows that physical death is inevitable, and in the borderland, with the guidance of teachers who understand the transition intimately, your consciousness practices dying, repeatedly, gradually familiarizing itself with the sensations of release, the moment of separation, the journey through what many describe as a tunnel of light. Cayce explained that death dreams are not prophecies of how you will die. They're training sessions for how to die consciously, without panic, without resistance, without the confusion that can trap souls in the earth plane reflection for extended periods. The falling dream. You're learning to release control, to surrender to the inevitable without fighting it. The drowning dream. You're practicing letting go of breath, the most primal attachment to physical life. The dream where you're being chased into darkness. You're learning that what you fear is not actually dangerous, it's transition, and resisting it creates suffering while accepting it brings peace. In one reading preserved in the ARE archives, Cayce described a woman who had experienced recurring death dreams her entire adult life. Always different scenarios, sometimes falling, sometimes illness, sometimes accidents, but always ending the same way, the moment before impact or the final breath, when acceptance flooded through her and everything became light. She feared these dreams meant she would die young. When Cayce accessed her records, he found something entirely different. Her soul had died traumatically in multiple past lives, experiencing terror and confusion during the transition. This lifetime, her soul had made a priority of practicing conscious death during sleep, ensuring that when her actual physical death came, she would recognize it, accept it, and move through it with grace. The dreams weren't warnings. They were preparation. Cayce taught that those who practice death consciously during dreams cross over more smoothly when physical death actually arrives. They recognize the sensations. They understand what's happening. They don't cling desperately to their failing body or panic as consciousness begins to separate. They simply release. And they move into the borderland with curiosity and calm rather than fear and resistance. This is why spiritual traditions across cultures have taught death meditation practices, not to be morbid, but to be ready. The Tibetan Buddhists have the Bardo Thodol. The Egyptian mystery schools had elaborate death preparation rituals, and Edgar Cayce's readings consistently emphasized, practice dying before you die, and when death comes, it will feel like coming home. You can work with your death dreams consciously. When you wake from one, instead of dismissing it as a nightmare, sit with it. Replay the dream in your mind, but this time, stay present through the entire experience. Feel the fear, but don't run from it. Notice how the moment of death, the moment you think will be agony, often transforms into peace, light, release. This is your soul showing you the truth about death. It's not an ending to be feared, but a transition to be navigated. And you've been preparing for it every night of your life, whether you remembered or not. But preparation for death is only part of the borderland's purpose. The other part, equally important, is protection, because not everything you encounter in those dimensions is benevolent, and not every spirit who approaches you has your best interests at heart. Edgar Cayce was remarkably balanced in his testimony about the spirit world. He shared its wonders without romanticizing it, and he warned of its dangers without instilling paranoia. The borderland, he insisted, is real, and like any real territory, it contains both beauty and hazard.